Hi everyone, welcome back. I hope you're in the mood for cookies because today we're making coffee cinnamon cookies. This recipe comes from dearchrissy.com. She calls them cinnamon coffee cookies, but there's not that much coffee in it, so I just switched it up. Honestly, I just made a mistake. Cinnamon coffee cookies is what they are. Um, so her recipe called for 1 tablespoon of instant coffee dissolved in 1 tablespoon of hot water. And I am only making this recipe because I have a whole lot of instant coffee to get rid of. I drink decaf, although I don't really drink it that much, and so I want to get rid of it. And I put 2 tablespoons of coffee in 1 tablespoon of water, and that was a good ratio. I would honestly even put more in if it dissolves well enough and it doesn't get all thick and whatnot, because this recipe doesn't have that much of a strong coffee flavor, and that's what I was looking for. And I feel like when you have decaf, you can put as much coffee as you want in something, and there's no negative side effects. There's no staying awake at night because you had too many cookies. So it's you're going to put the coffee in the hot water first and then let that sit off to the side. And then you will mix together 1/2 cup of butter and 1/2 cup of shortening. Then we're going to add the sugar, and it is 3/4 cup of white sugar and 3/4 cup of brown sugar. It doesn't say dark or light brown, it just says packed brown sugar, which doesn't mean that much to me. Like, that means shove it in the measuring spoon and don't weigh it instead. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you prefer to cook using weight like my husband does, cooking with volume versus cooking with, I guess it is weight versus cooking with volume. I prefer volume just because every recipe is like that already, and I don't like doing conversions too much if I don't have to. So sometimes when a recipe calls for volume or weight instead, I'll convert it online myself. So I'm mixing partial sugar and partial sucralose because I have an insulin issue. So I did a 2-to-1 ratio of sucralose to sugar, 2/4 cups of sucralose and 1/4 cup of sugar for both the white sugar and the brown sugar. Next, I'm mixing 3/4 cup of my white sugar substitute mix with a little bit of molasses. A tablespoon is probably the right amount if you want to do this yourself, and I'm mixing it by hand because I find that is the most efficient way to get all the molasses into every granule of sugar and have it soaking the way you want. So I am not really a coffee person. I actually never drank coffee until a few months ago, and I did it because I, I read that coffee can help you go to the bathroom, and I needed that at the time, and I don't need it anymore, so I stopped drinking a lot of coffee, and I have all this extra coffee to use up. I'm adding more molasses in this scene here because I didn't have quite enough the first time around. You can see that it's a lot lighter and not as moist and heavy as it would be when I'm finished with this. So I had this instant decaf coffee. Another reason I never drank coffee was because I am very small framed, and I'm very short. I'm 5 feet tall, and I weigh less than the average human. And I always thought that caffeine would, like, I have sleeping issues. I thought that caffeine would hurt that, and that it would also just make me jittery and creepy. And so I went with decaf when I decided I needed to have some assistance in the restroom. So we're going to be adding 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. The recipe doesn't actually say to do this, but I decided to cream the butter and sugars first before adding the rest of the spices. That is what most cookie recipes have you do first, cream the butter and sugar. So I'm going to do that myself here. And then I'll add 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and 1/4 teaspoon of ground cloves. If you don't have cloves, I would double the nutmeg quantity. I don't know what we use cloves for besides this, and there was another recipe I made recently that had cloves in it. And I don't know if you've smelled cloves lately, but smell cloves and tell me whether or not you think that smells like Christmas, because I could smell that stuff all day long and be happy thinking about Christmas time. Then mix everything together, and we're going to be adding our eggs. There will be 2 eggs. I didn't want to make this a vegan recipe because we now have too many eggs in our house. So if you want to make this vegan, one easy egg substitute is 1 tablespoon of cornstarch mixed with 3 tablespoons of water, and then you add that to the batter. I would do 1 egg substitute at a time and mix between, just to keep it from being too watery at once. And you'll see I always add my eggs one at a time in a separate bowl because that was how my mom taught me in case you end up with a rotten egg. After you've mixed the eggs into the batter, add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now you're going to add the coffee that you made earlier. It's had time to percolate. Percolate, right? That's a coffee phrase, right? Anyway, that's why you made it early in the process. So add the coffee into the batter and then stir that all up. Now we're going to add the flour. I'm adding whole wheat flour because I always bake with that because of my glycemic index in my blood, which probably is not the right term, my insulin issue. So you need to add 2 1/4 cups of flour. I'm doing 1/4 cup first and then 2 cups after that. The recipe also says you should add the 2 cups slowly and mix between the additions. So I'm doing about 1/2 cup at a time. So half of 1 cup increment at a time, and then mixing on slow speed because you could do it on fast speed, but I didn't want to put the lid on and make a mess without the lid on. So I'm starting to think about what else I can do with these leftover instant coffee crystals, and I'm wondering if since this recipe involved making a little bit of coffee in water, could a person use liquid coffee in place of milk in a cake recipe, and would that taste okay? Let me know if you've got any coffee recipes. Well, not coffee recipes, because that sounds like a drink, but any recipes that use instant coffee specifically, because that's all I've got in the house. We don't have a coffee maker. So you'll see the consistency of the batter is getting thick. This is where it should be at this point. Scrape it down from the sides of the bowl if you need to. It should be pretty soft, but also not liquidy at all. So next you're going to cover the dough and refrigerate it for 1 to 2 hours. I did 2 hours. The recipe also says you can refrigerate it overnight, which might be a better option because it was still pretty soft after 2 hours, although that did not change the consistency of the finished product. Now we're going to be rolling the dough into a cinnamon sugar mixture. This is the same one I use for my snickerdoodle recipe, which I have not shared with you yet. But if you want to make your own and keep it on hand like I do, apparently we like making cookies, it's 8 teaspoons of cinnamon to a half cup of sugar, and that should all fit in a 2-ounce jar, 2-ounce spice jar with maybe a little bit left over. So roll your dough into balls about 1 inch or 2 big, and then roll the balls into the cinnamon sugar mixture. Now that I'm thinking about it, this recipe is almost exactly like snickerdoodles. There was no cream of tartar, and obviously there's no coffee in snickerdoodles, but those are the big 2 differences. This is basically a coffee snickerdoodle recipe. So if you like what you're seeing, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I would definitely appreciate it. This is my second tray I'm rolling. I did shove all of them onto 2 trays. I think it ended up making, based on the size I was doing, about 15 or 16 cookies. Now you're going to bake them at 325 for 10 to 12 minutes. I did 11 minutes because I like to do between the recommended time for cookies. It says the centers will look a little underdone and that you should cool them on the cookie sheet for about 4 minutes. I ended up throwing mine back in the oven for the full 12 minutes because I thought they looked more underdone than they should have been. So now we're going to let them sit here for 4 minutes, and then we'll move them onto the cooling rack. Since I use sugar substitutes, my cookies don't spread as much as ones with full sugar will. And also a lot of the suggestions for how you can tell the food is done, especially with cookies, doesn't match up for sugar-free cookies or low-sugar cookies. So you may not need to let them stay in the oven longer. A couple of the bigger cookies still looked raw on top, so I threw them back in the oven for a couple minutes. and then they came out fine. So you can see it's definitely cookie on the inside. It's a soft cookie. It's got a good color and it tastes good, but I think I can taste the cinnamon a lot more than I can taste the coffee, and I was hoping to taste the coffee more in this recipe. Cinnamon and coffee is a good combination. I would maybe want to do chocolate and coffee next time. All right, guys, I really hope you like this. Happy eating.